Tim's a keen amateur chef and cooks daily. He dreams of improving his cookery skills enough to one day become a professional chef. He knows that practice is how we improve at something. However, he increasingly becomes aware that he's not improving at the speed he wants to. But why? He's certainly practicing enough, as we've seen, but then it dawns on him that perhaps the problem is that the recipes he's practicing aren't difficult enough. He's getting increasingly fast and accurate at simple recipes, but none of them are really challenging him with new techniques, ingredients, or processes. So, he buys a big book of more challenging recipes. The next day, he tries to cook a soufflé. He clears just enough space on his cluttered worktop to put the book down, and gets to work. It's a difficult recipe with lots of steps and precise timings. Tim scrambles around, trying to find the right ingredients and utensils amongst all of the stuff covering his worktop. At the end of it, he has made a soufflé of sorts, but has spent the whole time distracted and panicking, and he's not sure if he's actually learnt anything from the whole stressful experience. After he's had a chance to lie down, he realizes that he was making it hard on himself. By trying to work on a cluttered and disorganized worktop, he's added lots of distractions, such as searching for ingredients and utensils that take his attention away from the skill he's trying to learn. So the next day, before he starts cooking, he clears the worktop of clutter, except for the precise utensils and ingredients that he needs for this recipe. With an organized worktop in front of him, and nothing to distract him, he gets to work. This time, making the soufflé is still challenging, but his new distraction-free environment means that he can not only complete the recipe, but master it. He can even think about how these new techniques connect with the cooking techniques he already knows. At the end of the session, he knows that he's learned something new. This story is an analogy for a concept that's central for all learning professionals: cognitive load. Cognitive load theory is a framework developed by Sweller for understanding how we process new information and learn new things. In it, our working memory is like the worktop in Tim's kitchen. Just as Tim uses his worktop as a space to manipulate ingredients and utensils to cook, we use our working memories to manipulate information in order to learn. Just as Tim's worktop is a limited space that he places the ingredients and cookware on temporarily, our working memories are limited spaces for temporarily holding and manipulating information. Next, there are different loads that define how difficult the learning is. The intrinsic load is the difficulty of the new thing being learned. In our analogy, this equates to the difficulty of Tim's recipes. A too simple recipe, like too simple material in a course or lesson, gives too low an intrinsic load, which means it's easy, but we don't learn much from it. A recipe that is too complex, like a lesson that's too complex, has too high an intrinsic load, which also means that we don't learn much. We might feel overwhelmed or confused. A course or a lesson that has a challenging but achievable intrinsic load is like the soufflé recipe. It feels difficult, but by concentrating we can succeed, and learn a lot along the way. The next type of load is the extraneous load. This is like the clutter on Tim's worktop. It's the distractions that aren't part of the thing you're trying to learn, but which take up space in your working memory. Tim finds cooking new dishes harder when the worktop is cluttered, and we find learning new things harder when our working memory is full of distractions. Finally, there's the germane load. The germane load is the mental effort that you put into understanding and processing new information, which is positive because it helps you learn better. As Tim tried cooking the soufflé for a second time, he thought about the process and made connections to related techniques and recipes. This mental effort helped him to learn better. Likewise, if you think hard about information that you're learning, organize it, elaborate on it, and link it to other concepts that you know, you'll learn the new information better, So, how is this relevant to you as a learning professional? Many courses, lessons, or other learning activities are made less effective because they're not designed with cognitive load in mind. For example, creating learning materials that are much too challenging or much too easy give either too high or too low a cognitive load, and so learning doesn't happen effectively. Creating learning materials that are full of distractions or which overwhelm the learner with details give a high extraneous load, which fill up the learner's working memory and make them less likely to learn the relevant information. So, what are some practical solutions to falling into these traps? Here are some ideas. First, make every effort to reduce extraneous cognitive load in materials, explanations, and practice activities. Be like Tim, clearing away every unnecessary item from his worktop. In learning materials, these unnecessary distractions can be complicated or unclear language, unnecessary visual or audio effects, unhelpful images, or irrelevant information. Be ruthless and strip it back to just the important stuff. If you're explaining something to learners, think twice before including that tangentially related anecdote from your holiday in France. Further, use strategies such as chunking, scaffolding, or worked examples in cases where there is a high intrinsic load to reduce the intrinsic load and help your learners achieve success. You're always trying to achieve a balance between the intrinsic load being neither too low nor too high. It's the work of a lifetime to become highly skilled in this. Finally, make the theory of cognitive load your constant companion in designing learning materials and experiences. The reason I say constant is that the concept of cognitive load is always relevant. Every activity, task, or explanation should be considered in the light of the questions. Is the intrinsic cognitive load appropriate? Is the extraneous cognitive load too high? Can it be lowered? Will the germane cognitive load be right? I'm sure you'll come up with your own analogies and ways of thinking about cognitive load in action. I like the image of Tim's kitchen worktop, as it reminds us to keep things clean, clear, and simple. And it is something most of us can relate to. By minimizing extraneous load in learning materials and activities, learners can focus on germane load and master the intrinsic load of the learning process, and they can learn more faster. I'll be putting out more videos breaking down powerful concepts for learning professionals, so feel free to subscribe if you'd be interested in seeing those, or let me know in the comments below any topics you'd like me to cover in the future. Until then, happy learning.